You are now listening to an exclusive celebrity guest star interview with none other than the Mr. Saturday Night.
Hello.
Nick, how are you?
Hey, how are you?
Fantastic. Thank you so much and welcome as our celebrity guest host. Now, should I call you Nick? Should I call you Chef Nicky? Or should I call you your lordship? You get to pick one.
You know what? A lot of my good friends and family call me Nicky.
All right.
Usually, Chef Nick. A lot of people say as well. Anything is just fine.
Okay, good. So you have been cooking professionally for, is it 18 years or more than that at this point?
Oh, more than that. I've been in the hospitality industry for 30 years.
Oh,
yeah,
God.
yeah. Since I was. Since I was younger. I mean, actually, depending on different stages of growing up within it, my grandparents worked on the Italian market in South Philadelphia. My father was an amazing cook, always still is, been cooking. So I've been surrounded as a kid that grew up in an Italian family with food in my life, my whole life. So I was always immersed into it, very interested and driven by it.
Personal chef to the stars, a revered cocktail mixologist, world traveler, husband, father, and most importantly of all, surfer.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I'm trying to place that now. I was like a Tyrone, Altoona guy, so that would be more like Central PA. But
yeah, that's going a little west of here. Yeah, it's about a half hour north of Philadelphia.
Huh.
It was pretty central. I mean, get on the train, be in New York in an hour. You're in the city, driving within half hour in Philly, and at the beach within 45 minutes, Poconos, and it was nice. It's a really beautiful area to grow up, and I had spent 22 years in Los Angeles, and eventually made the move back here in 2020 with my family.
Yeah. And as you said, at the tender age of 7, working at your grandparents' produce stand in the Italian market in South Philly, you used that. Yep. You used probably your experience and your knowledge and expertise with produce. You learned a lot of northern and southern Italian recipes. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've worked all throughout Italy as well. I'd say mainly growing up in my family, it was probably a little bit more focused on Southern Italian cuisine, or we can call it peasant food to a certain extent. I was, just taught to kind of use everything, and with great ingredients, you can use the most simple things and make great food. So that was something I was always inspired with Italian cuisine growing up in it.
So for the purposes of our audience who may not know the difference, including perhaps yours truly, the differences between northern and southern Italian cuisines.
Yeah, I think when you're in southern Italy, you're certainly that much, depending whether, I think up and down the coast. I mean, Italy's surrounded by either the Adriatic Sea, the Mediterranean. There's different parts of it where you're certainly pulling different types of seafood. But what I love the most about Italy is as you roll through the different regions from north to south, every area has its own pasta or its own seafood that it focuses on, the breads, different preparations, olive oils, wines, of course, and a lot of that changes in the different regions. I think when you're in the south, you're focused on that much more of like the red rocket peppers, andouille sausage, gnocchi, whole grilled fish. Ooh. And then again, as you go into the north, it gets a little heavier sometimes with heavier pastas or risotto, and then getting in a little bit more into the truffles, where that certainly stands out, and a little bit bigger wines, of course, as opposed to something lighter, more refreshing orange wines in the south, or Sicily, of course, which I never consider Italy, nor would any Sicilian. That's very, very different on its own as well.
Yeah. So not only, were you exposed for your love for food, your knowledge of food, your family at age 7, how did it come to be that your mom got you started with television at an early age?
Yeah, she got me started with like modeling and like acting like at a young age, doing a lot of print work for John Wanamaker's and J.C. Penney and commercials for like American Express. And yeah, it was fun. I did a lot of that when I was younger. I think got me interested. It kind of gave me a little bit more interest in working with entertainment later on in my career. But yeah, it was something I always enjoyed. It's in the restaurant business, you're constantly you're creating experiences. I mean, look at a lot of my restaurants that I've done through the years is almost like theaters, and you are putting on a show, hopefully a consistent one, and one that's always going to bring the guests back. So I've always had a little bit of that in me. I love making people feel good and being a great host, and I think that's what I've always done best.
Television, 2009, Top Chef Masters. What was the most challenging part of competing on that program?
Oh, well, it was actually not the first time I had been on TV, but the first time I had been on TV in the culinary world. And I just remember the cameras were so big and there were so many of them. It was a huge production. I remember I sliced my finger on the mandolin cooking something, and I remember I kept it to myself because I didn't want the cameras like zeroing in on me and being that guy.
Right.
But there's a lot of pressure. At the end, we saw it through, and it was intense. I mean, at the end, we were cooking for like 12 of the top food critics in the country, and you don't normally get that type of opportunity, and it's like a bigger production like that. So a lot of pressure, of course. Always.
So having said that, was there any part, I guess, during the competition where maybe you doubted yourself or you felt a little out of your comfort zone?
Yeah, I think there's been many parts of my career where I've maybe doubted myself, but I always try to be better than the day before, and I think competition always makes you better. So that's always been a big push for me in challenging myself, and certainly the chefs and environments I've surrounded myself with is always, made me a little bit stronger, a little bit sharper in some ways. I think when you're a chef, or obviously like many other different, careers, you're always a student. You're never done learning. I think that's the greatest thing about cooking is there's no rules. And that you can cook what you like, and there's always something new, a new ingredient, a new genre of food, a new style, a new preparation. So that always keeps things evolving.
Television 2012 to 2016, Bar Rescue, which I think everyone is familiar with. What made you want to be a part of that show? Did you audition for it? Did they call you? How'd that happen?
That's good. That's a great question. Well, actually, in 2012, I had just gotten back from Italy. Spent 4 months out there cooking. And when I came back, I had a very solid truffle connection to white truffles. So I was actually doing a lot of dinners all throughout Malibu, Bel Air, Beverly Hills, Bel Air areas. And I was doing a party somewhere, and I had met a gentleman, and he started talking to me in the beginning of the dinner. And I said, hey, man, I got like 6 courses to put out. Let's catch up at the end. And then we finally caught up. And at that time, I was pitching some different concepts of shows. And he introduced himself as the vice president of development for Spike TV. And he said he had a show in mind for me. And with that meeting, I pitched my show. He shot it down. And then I was almost like, okay, hey, great, nice to meet you kind of thing. And he said, no, I actually really think you'd be great on this new show called Bar Rescue. Have you seen it? And I think I had I remember seeing some like advertisements for it. And I was like, is that what the guy is kind of screaming? And like, yeah, I think you got it. And a week later, I was on a Skype interview. And then the following week, I was off to Vegas for my first episode. So I had shot quite a few of those in that 4-year period, as well as 3 Back to the Bar episodes, and it was an amazing experience.
So obviously you parachute into troubled situations. What do you think looking back? Was there any common issue you see with bars and restaurants when you first get there on the scene? I mean, I'll stop. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of people that have the best intentions of opening up a restaurant or a bar, but don't really, never had any schooling in it, or possibly didn't spend enough time applying themselves or taking that extra initiative, what it takes to be successful in hospitality. And I think they just kind of get caught in their own ways. They don't have standard operating procedures put in place. They haven't really come up in the ranks to make enough mistakes, or possibly even making mistakes with someone else's money. And then they get themselves in a position where they, get a property, hire people that they know or family and friends, and they get taken advantage of. Or, some people along the way have had either, drug or alcohol problems, and they just get caught up with this place that's like their own entertainment. And they forget that it's not for their experience. It's not for their entertainment. It's to, create an institution. It's to create a spot that's going to generate revenue and not take it away, and not have it being drank away or by your team members or even the owners. So a common thread, I think, has just been, one, people sometimes have big egos and they don't want to get out of their own way.
Yeah.
And then there's other times where they just don't have the experience and they're getting themselves into something that they can't maintain.
Yeah. John, without talking out of school, what you see is what you get, or a little bit of that for the cameras too?
Yeah, you know what, John, you got to think of it this way. We're all coming into a place where at like the 12th hour, where the business is in debt. They're not getting the business they should. There's possibly theft going on. There's, every scenario you could possibly think of. We're limited on our time and ultimately what we can succeed in the time that we have. So I think, like anywhere, John comes in fairly calm unless something's completely out of line or out of control. And, sometimes he's got to turn the heat up. I've seen John get really sympathetic to a lot of people as well, and just like feeling horrible. And then he has this like strong determination behind it. But with that, and with anything that all of us do on that show, our reputation is on the line. We have a very limited amount of time to accomplish what we want to do. And we want to be able to set them up with the tools for success, and not setting them up for failure. And you're not able to be the nicest person when you're limited to all of that. So even myself, I've snapped out, on Bar Rescue, and it's natural. And it's never been anything that's been scripted, anything like that. No one's ever told me what to do. And I think that was the greatest thing about it. I had an amazing bond with the crew behind the camera, as well as any mixologist, chef, or host that I've worked with. And, it's always been a very positive environment. I mean, we're getting together. The camaraderie is good. We understand what our execution plan is. And it's like we're on a mission, and we have to adjust and adapt to any situation we get ourselves into.
So as you say, you're limited on time. You're there as a teacher, so to speak. You're an agent of change. Looking back, did you learn anything from Bar Rescue that maybe you didn't expect to learn?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, I can answer this quickly and very truthfully and honestly. It's, I came from working in Michelin star restaurants. I came from a very high caliber, environment before I actually started Bar Rescue in 2012. So I had to think pretty quickly on my feet, and dumbing down, and I'm saying that in the most respectful way,
sure,
a lot of the dishes or preparations that I was doing before, because I had to pass that off to someone that didn't have the experience that I have. They might have just been thrown into a kitchen, or they're, or maybe they were just a passionate cook that lost their fire and are just ordering food through Cisco and making pre-made processed food. But it was, I felt like I always came in there and wanted to inspire everyone. And I was able to do that with elevated bar food. And, I remember setting up working with my first food producer, and I remember submitting my list of things, and she looked at me and goes, "Oh, darling," she goes, I hate to be your dream killer, but good part of this isn't going to happen. She's like, we're shopping at the Restaurant Depot in Iowa or wherever we were. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, no problem. So there was like some fine tunes and tweaks, but what it eventually actually ended up going into and doing, let's say, solid year and a half of a bunch of episodes, and is I had my own Bar Rescue in Venice Beach, California, and the place was called the Venice Whaler. which was an underperforming beachfront, quintessential California beach bar that,
Sure.
Kind of smelled like urine when you walked in. There wasn't the best things going on in there. All the food was frozen and processed. And, and then I ended up taking that on my own. And I think without Bar Rescue, I wouldn't have been as prepared for that particular concept. And then it became a model and a formula that I ended up kind of moving along with and being very successful with, as I took on more places.
So when you take over the Venice Whaler, you make a number of changes. Did you ever get downstairs and just sort of feel the ghosts of the musicians before you? Does that make sense?
You know what? So the coolest thing about the Venice Whaler is it used to be called the Crab Shell, and it was the downstairs, exactly. And the Beach Boys, the Doors, the Beatles. I talked to a lot of old heads from the Venice area, and they would tell me some amazing stories. Like one guy came in and was like, "You see that wall right there?" He goes, "I remember standing there with John Lennon one night, and we were all talking, and we had just eaten seafood, and I think Jimi Hendrix was there, and there was a few other people." I was like, and I really love that because I'm a big classic rock guy. I loved going to the Grateful Dead when I was younger. I appreciate that type of nostalgia and history because it feeds into the whole concept. But there's my first experience going there was when I first got to LA. And it was usually the last stop of my night when I was younger. So I even have my own stories from that place. But it was, what we created there was really a beautiful thing. I mean, it was looking at a business that was doing $3 million a year, and about maybe 400,000 of that was in food sales. The rest was obviously in booze. And, that'll create a certain kind of environment. And what I did almost over a 2-year period was switching up the purveyors, changing the marketing, the branding, the overall culture of the business. And we were really able to turn it around and turn it into what would be a $12 million business, and roughly 40-60, food to alcohol with much better margins. And, that's the formula that I was talking about that really, you can take advantage of a place that has a beautiful view, and it's essentially a tourist trap, really, because you're selling real estate, the seats, anyone that'll really sit in it. But when you put that much more pride, initiative, and integrity in everything you do, you're going to create that much more of a beautiful thing.
Having said all that dramatic change, and maybe that occurred over time, were you able to keep the regulars?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a very good question. That was something that we had a little bit of an issue with in the beginning of that particular project because, that we've all found those places that we just love, that local bar on Main Street, or, that place that you always go to and you're like, man, I don't ever want anyone to change anything about this. I think we all got that place. And I certainly have quite a few, not only in this country, but around the world. And everything is just good the way it is. And hey, you know what? When you get a beach area that's somewhat the city by the sea, you're going to get that much more of a different crowd, and the way the place kind of gets tracked around. So there was we were dealing with a lot as far as the homeless issue, and just normal riffraff. But what I will say is, over time, a lot of the locals who, I've always been such great friends with everyone in the Venice area, started to come up to me and be like, "You know what, man, I really appreciate everything that you did. This food is amazing. You guys really made this that much more of a destination and a great spot." And as I think some had a pause in the beginning, there was many of them that came back, and then that much more, because we started attracting crowds from West Hollywood, Beverly Hills, Malibu, all the surrounding areas, Santa Monica, and look where it's at today. We have the Venice Whaler, there's a Santa Monica Whaler, there's a Newport Whaler. I think it's really been a good ride for that particular concept.
For to introduce that kind of change, what a great compliment for the locals to say, you know what, I love it. It's actually better.
Yeah.
It's better. I'll come 4 times a week. And so that's great.
And listen, there was so much room for improvement. And I think there's a couple other places that maybe it wasn't as bad, and like maybe somebody would make a change and possibly not have the same, outcome as I had. But, I was already a staple in the community as a surfer and just someone that's lived in that area for quite a while. So, I have a good way with the guests and the community, and I was always, kind of involved with everything. So I had nothing but great support.
I will tell you in a few moments when we get around to your Netflix series that obviously is a very important part of bringing things back to life. How much longer from the Venice Whaler to the Borscht Belt in Pennsylvania?
Well, we had created the Venice Restaurant Group in like 2014, and I stayed in LA until 2020. So that ride there, is up until that point. I still hold equity in the Venice Whaler concept. But the Whaler was ultimately the inspiration to what then created Restaurants on the Edge on Netflix. And it was the idea of any place that has a great view can be an underperforming tourist trap. And it gives you that opportunity to be able to uplift it in a positive way. So we had gotten that show greenlit in 2018 and shot it in 2019 all over the world. And then when I came back in 2020, initially I was opening up a different concept back east. Mm-hmm. And the pandemic hit. I moved back in March of 2020, and I had to switch up my concept pretty quickly. Uh-huh. So my business partner and I both kind of put our heads together and decided that opening up a Jewish deli would be, something great that we could open, that we could scale, something we could replicate, and would be a great brand to put in this area.
Restaurants on the Edge. You are executive producer, co-creator. It is season 2 has wrapped. It's on Netflix. If you didn't already know, I guess I'm speaking to the audience here. Clearly, you know where it is. What is, for their purposes, what's the premise of the show?
Yeah, as I stated, it's the premise is that you can go around the world, and whether you're in a desert or a mountaintop or looking over a beautiful ocean or somewhere in a city, there's going to be somewhere with a great view that a lot of people are going to want to go after. But sometimes with those places, they're not pushing the limits as far as what they can accomplish on the hospitality side with food and beverage, or even aesthetics for that, So, a lot of it, you can look into the reviews of, finding an area and looking at the reviews and what place might be getting pounded that has a great view. And, it just goes to show, a place with a great view doesn't have to be that. You can, if you take your time and you kind of dissect everything and you understand the food that reflects on the environment and the topical finishes and the knowledge that you can put behind a lot of that. Myself, Karen Bond, Dennis Prescott, my co-hosts, we were a really great team, and we traveled around the world, everywhere from Hong Kong to Austria to Malta, Costa Rica, Canada, Hawaii, some really, really, really beautiful places. And in every area, we found our new challenges in those areas, but we also really kind of dove into the culture and to get ourselves inspired in all these different countries.
I was trying, two things. I lost 2 entire weekends binging both seasons of the program, and I got to tell you, I absolutely love it. If I had an elevator pitch and I had to do it in one sentence, it would sort of be, I guess, it's a little like Bar Rescue without the yelling. It's much more... It's much more, I'm struggling to find the right word, where you sit down and you collaborate together. And the beginning of that process, I know, you have to sit down with them and have that sort of awkward discussion where you go through some of the reviews.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, the reviews, it's something that every business has to handle, and sometimes there's a lot of constructive criticism there. And I think some reviews are, not coming with the best intent. And, I don't know, one restaurateur chef out there that doesn't have to deal with that. And I think there's a lot to be learned from reviews that you can go over in your weekly meetings. And hey, you know what? This is obviously a pattern and something that people are saying. So you have to be able to put your ego aside and say, you know what, this is something we need to focus on and change. But I also look at a company like Yelp, and I think it's just poison for the industry because it allows someone to be able to put something up that not only hurts the optics, but eventually the revenue of the business for how it's perceived. And that I do not like. And because I've read some great reviews from some people, and I'm like, wow, good on them. I appreciate what that person said. They really took the time and they care and they pointed out some obvious things. Let's invite them back in for a better experience. And then there's some people who take some personal attacks on a review, and they feel entitled and heard. Maybe they're not for whatever motive they might have. But it's a difficult thing because no one wants anyone coming in your kitchen and telling you what to do, or nobody wants anyone coming into anyone's business and pointing those things out. You can literally do that to any celebrity chef or restaurateur out there. There's somebody out there with an opinion, and you can't make everyone happy. Yeah. You really can't. But what you can do is constantly point out the things that need to be changed. You can uplift it in a positive way, and action is the only thing that's going to change things. So, got to get off your ass and fix it.
I've talked to a number of restaurateurs over the years, and maybe this is somewhat of I'll say 10 years. Maybe I don't know if it's right or wrong of a recent, not influence, but Yelp, people extorting. Oh, gee, if you don't do this, I'll do that. And then you probably have, influencers. Gee, if I just had a free meal, I would write such wonderful things, right?
Yeah, well, you know what? It actually comes directly from the company. I mean, there's this person that just created this profile and wrote this one review, and it's like really scathing, and it's something you want out. Well, over time, Yelp, I almost feel like will extort you in paying extra money in order to move those reviews out of the way or to make them disappear or put the better ones up high. But, I've seen some pretty creative responses from those. And, it's funny. I've read some of these, and it's just like, I've seen the restaurant owners like, well, we double checked your bill and your tab doesn't exist, or something like that. Or we did see you in there and you came in and, X, Y, and Z kind of happened. But at the end of the day, if I'm really good at, and this is what I tell anyone, I have a lot of new people on my team, and I'm saying, listen, you have an issue with someone, please let me know. Maybe you shadow me within that part, and you'll see how I'll put the fire out and how we can turn the whole situation around. It's really just how you speak to people. It's of course, you might be eating a little shit along the way.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, people want to be acknowledged. And I would much rather keep it a frequent guest rather than try to get my opinion across and make someone feel like crap, and not wanting to come back and then telling every other person that. It's like, I really like to put my best foot forward and see if maybe we can have an opportunity to create a new experience for you, a better one. And I can't tell you how many of those I've had in my career where they actually end up becoming really great people.
Nice.
And regulars and just much more than just a reoccurring revenue, but a solid patron that comes to your business.
So you want people to come in. You want them to have an amazing experience, whether they leave a review, don't leave a review. That's great, I suppose. But have you noticed, have there been changes in the business? So turning, have an amazing experience, but yet at the same time, depending on the cuisine and the menu, you're going to have to flip that table at some point. Have you noticed that, it takes longer these days because people are photographing the food? You know what I mean?
Yeah, listen, nobody wants to be rushed. And I think there's different concepts that certainly require, different turns of the tables, we'll say. Whether you're working with Open Table and it's just like, oh, yes, we would, we would love to accommodate you for your 7 p.m. reservation. However, we will need that table back at 8:30 or things like that. At the deli, that's not how we deal with it. Guests come in, they can make a reservation. Sometimes there's parties and we have to let people know we'll need the table back at a certain time. But I think, the restaurant is a machine. There's a number of different things, from the server not taking the order on time or greeting the table quick enough, or what time that gets into the kitchen, how hard has the kitchen been hit. It's really dictated by how the actual restaurant is going to execute. And yeah, there's that many more foodies and influencers out now. I think it's a compliment. I love when people take that time to photograph the food and and I don't know who these people are. They could have 500,000 followers or more, and they just wanted to document their stuff. So I never push anyone along, and I think social media is such a huge part of any business now. And obviously it's like we always want to be able to get our experience out there to that many more people that will want to walk through the door or order on Goldbelly or visit any of our locations. So
trends, do you think that there's a new trend or an emerging trend that's here to stay? And do you think the flip side of that, there's something that just may fade away?
Well, I actually just got back from the bar and restaurant show in Las Vegas. I think this is like my 12th year in a row that I've done that. So, and I do a lot of food festivals around the country. So I'm always picking some things up here and along the way. And, regardless, what I did notice and what I am very tuned in on, a lot of people there's non-alcoholic cocktails are that much more popular these days. Whether they're actual non-alcoholic spirits or just the preparations of having those cocktails on your menu. And I think like plant-based food, and I'm not talking about like some weird meat made up that tastes like beef, but it's actually beets and mushrooms. I think it's more the chef's approach and being able to just give that many more options, or being able to accommodate a guest by pulling out a certain ingredient, because you're making people feel that much better. I know for someone that does quite a bit of bread out of a deli, an elevated deli concept, with our gluten-free bagels, gluten-free bread, vegan cream cheese, and then, of course, vegetarian options. I think that's all here to stay, because there's plenty of people out there with allergies and restrictions, and there's a lot of people out there that don't drink alcohol anymore, or just don't drink anymore, or whatever.
Sure.
And I think it's nice, a lot of those people, I have some friends that are sober or just don't want to drink as much, and it's nice that they can get out of the house and they actually can go to a bar and get together with, the bar manager, whomever that has something nice planned out. Oh yeah. Do you like it sweet? Do you like it savory? Oh, cool. I've got a couple really cool things that I have on my seasonal menu for you. And I think that's just, what are we doing? We're trying to make the guest comfortable. We don't want to come off pretentious, and we want to be able to give options for everyone. So I think that's great. Anything that is actually getting kicked out, I don't know. I think just as long as you're creative with what you're doing and you are constantly evolving and pushing along the way, I think people are going to feel that. They're going to see that. They're going to taste it, as long as you're hitting all those senses. But if you're just serving pre-made, processed, frozen food and not putting any love into it, not doing weekly specials, seasonally changing your menu and getting involved with different events and things like that, then it's just not going to be as interesting to you, your team, or the community around you.
Yeah. How do you, on the program, how do you select the restaurants that are that appear on the show?
Well, are we talking about Restaurants on the Edge?
I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah. So, we would, obviously we had a budget we need to stay within. We would connect with directors of tourism and understand what type of trade outs would work, but really just getting into like Google and TripAdvisor, like different reviews in the different areas that we were looking into. And, and sure enough, you can just look at the map and see what restaurants have great views and may not be performing so well. And, just like any like bigger purchase I've made for myself, I think we've always broken it down to a couple different ones. And, and that was completely up to the production. And we ended up finding some really, really great ones. In one of the episodes in Slovenia, we actually had,
was this the mouse?
The dormouse out in the forest.
Yeah.
And then I was in search of the orange wine in the Goche medieval village from the 1400s.
And the honey.
That was, listen, every place I went to, I would love to go back to, and beautiful, but Slovenia was really a special place. That place hit me in a certain way, and I just fell in love with the country and everything that was in it. I'd love to go back there. We had a whole other restaurant set up before that, and I remember we hit the ground and we were almost scurrying trying to find another place. And our production team kind of got on it, ended up finding a spot. There was almost a possibility we weren't going to shoot there that week. And then we followed through with it, and it ended up being the most amazing group of people. And that's what I'm saying. Like, just in any day at a restaurant, there's always going to be something crazy that happens. And the same thing happens within production, but the show must go on. And you need to, again, adjust and adapt to your surroundings and figure out how you're going to make it happen.
I have to imagine you show up, you don't know what you're going to get necessarily, but if you've got love, if you care, if you've got passion, I could kind of train you up on the rest of it, but I can't teach you great stuff if you just don't care. You know what I mean? But I don't know.
Yeah.
What did you have a favorite? Well, maybe you just answered it, but was that your favorite destination, I guess is the question.
It's tough. I connected with so many amazing people. And when I say people, I mean, obviously there's people off camera that I connected with that were great. But I just loved Miriam and in Austria, and David, I really connected with them. I thought they were just such cool people. We would be sipping schnapps and just going up these beautiful mountains, and made some really great friends with them. And the team in Slovenia, they were just, everybody just had their own vibe. And it was just kind of cool getting into those different areas and getting into their world and hanging out with them. And, you're there for maybe 8 days, 10 days, some places. And your energy is so up. Hawaii was cool. How can you not love Hawaii? Of course, we were in Arizona. I had a great time going to the Cowboy Bar there. There was something beautiful to be said every spot we went to. Yeah. But I'd say Slovenia, Austria, and Malta were my big spots. But I also fell in love with Hong Kong because that was my first time there. And when I wasn't shooting or I wasn't on camera, I was on the subways going all around the town and checking out amazing restaurants and all kinds of cool markets. And that's just what I feed on when I'm in these places. So I got super inspired, to say the least.
If my count is right, I want to say 13 episodes already up on Netflix. Is there season 3 forthcoming?
I think the time for that would have certainly been right. The show went live February 28th of 2020. The second season went live, I think, May 10th of 2020. And the analytics as far as, how the show was doing, I believe was great. But unfortunately, the functionality of being able to go and shoot more during that time, my co-host couldn't even leave Canada. And then obviously time passes, and, maybe one day we'll get picked up for another 2 seasons or something, because the show made sense. It was shot beautifully, and we're certainly in a much better time now. But at the end of the day, I don't, listen, I'm just grateful that show got made. Yeah. It's very tough to get a show off the ground. And I have been pitching shows for quite a while, and when I look back on all my experiences of anything that I've done, I'm just grateful I had that opportunity. My diary from 2019 is far different from my diary from 2020. And I think that goes for all of us for going through an unprecedented time. So that show could have not ever been made. So it's like, I mean, what a dream. I was in so many different countries. I mean, even if I was in Malta, I was flying to Sicily after that because I didn't have to be in Austria for another 10 days. So I was like, hey, I'm going to go down to Sicily. And my dad flew out and met me, and we traveled the country for 10 days. And then he went back home, and I was off to Austria. So I really took advantage of a couple of the places I was in to be able to see and experience as much as I can.
Part of your experience and your background in history, personal chef to, if I've got these names right, Tom Hanks, Beastie Boys, Barbra Streisand, Cher, and others, correct?
That's absolutely. Oh, yeah.
All, I would imagine, would have different sort of culinary tastes and requirements. Again, I'm not looking for dirt, just any good stories?
Yeah, I do. But unfortunately, behind those stories are NDAs.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough.
What I will say is, listen, I cooked for Anthony Kiedis. He's the lead singer of the Chili Peppers. Became a great friend and just a really sweet, amazing person. Hank Azaria, hysterical, love his family. Just really good people. Tom, he was always very funny. I cooked for quite a few actors, musicians, politicians, done a lot of travel. And, it's funny, as far as being a kid that grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, I went out to California in 98. And, when I look back, it's kind of wild. I remember coming home and telling stories and my friends looking at me like, yeah, right. No way, kind of thing. And I'm like, no, man, I'm serious. That happened. I saw that. And I mean, there was all kinds of characters I met along the way.
Yeah.
Being in conversations in rooms that I never imagined being in. But, again, it was just, it's kind of wild that food was that component that kind of took me and opened up a lot of those doors. And that was only because I put my heart, soul, and passion behind that. And I think as long as everyone can find something that they love, don't worry about the money. Everything is going to follow it. If you just kind of keep the course, there's no, what is the saying? There's no great sailor made that doesn't go through rough seas. Because I also don't want to make it sound like anything was easy for me, because it definitely wasn't. There was a lot of times I didn't want to come home with my tail between my legs when I was younger in LA in the early 2000s, but I stuck it through and made it work. But that was because there was a lot of work. There was literally blood, sweat, and tears behind every day of it. So
not an easy industry, least of which is just the hours. And back to the stories. I have a case of orange wine here that was imported that says you could tell me some of those stories after maybe 4 or 5 hours. Couple more questions here. This is crazy hard for you to wrap your head around, but if you weren't working in your chosen field, restaurant and hospitality industry, what career path what career path do you think you would have taken? Any idea?
When I was younger, I probably would have said a pro surfer, but over time, I will answer this question pretty honestly. I would say I love science, and I thought being a science teacher was something I'd really enjoy, because I've taught a lot of cooking to kids, and I really enjoy teaching classes. I just did cooking demos out in Las Vegas, and I love a teacher's schedule of having the summer off. So it's for me, it's a month off in the winter, go snowboarding, summer off, I'm at the beach. Yeah. And more than anything, I love to geek out on science and astrology and oceanography, and it's just something I'm naturally already in. I'm actually in my backyard as I speak with you in Pennsylvania, and we're getting a really cool storm rolling in. So I'm always tuned into that stuff.
Isn't cooking, it's kind of science, right? Chemistry?
Yeah, there is a lot of molecular gastronomy behind it, depending on what your approach is. My cooking style has certainly been more open fire and coals and a little bit natural way of cooking.
Sure.
I think I was quoted on Bar Rescue or one of these shows saying, all I need is a knife and a flame, and I can make anything happen. And I love that primal part of cooking, of just being able to kind of work with it, what's in season. I think 90% of the time cooking at home, I'm cooking over a Weber because it's just an open fire and it's fun. I'm outside. It's kind of like, everyone gets involved. So, yeah.
Two more quick questions, and I'll let you get back to your impending storm. First one comes from our audience in chat, and the question is, I wonder if he ever goes out for dinner just with family and friends and finds the food not so good. Do you say anything, or do you just sort of leave unhappy?
Anyone that knows me, I never complain. And if I do have an issue with something, I think if I had a relationship with someone at the restaurant, I would tell them in the most respectful way.
Sure.
I certainly would never write a review, and I'm not that person that sits at a table and complains, because I wouldn't want to ruin anyone else's experience.
Yeah.
Obviously, my attention to detail is far different than anyone else, as their own would be in their, with what they're doing. So, I'm not, I can have fun wherever I go. And if something's not that great, you're not going to hear it from me.
Yeah.
And maybe depending on how the night goes, and we're having some tequilas and we're talking, and someone asks me that night, I'm going to be like, yeah, I was a little underwhelmed with that, or this, I'll speak pretty openly, but I won't do it in a disrespectful way. Ever.
So many people, and I'm that guy too. I go in and go, what could have been a bad day? Could be a bad day for me. I don't know. I'll give it another shot. I'll try something else on the menu. I'm not gonna write a review. I'm not gonna probably say anything in the restaurant.
Yeah.
So I don't know. One final question. And maybe this changes, it probably does. What do you have a guilty pleasure food?
Oh, I'm going to expose myself. My guilty pleasure food. Let's see here. I mean, it could be anything. It could really be like what do I eat? What do I crave?
Yeah.
Anything. Okay, so I do love pistachio cream. It's like a Sicilian pistachio cream. I love having that with peanut butter. I'm a big fan of peanut butter. I love ice cream. I love all ice cream. I don't eat mint chocolate chip, but I'll dabble with the rest of it. And I just what else? I like voodoo chips. They're always really good. Or good hard Snyder's pretzels with some spicy German mustard and pickles. Yeah. Those are little snacks, but I guess it depends what is my munchy craving. But because I've come up with some very creative things over time.
Do you get?
But I'm a simple guy. There could be an easy night of me, because I have 3 little girls. There could be an easy night of me pouring some Cinnamon Toast Crunch,
nice,
and just savoring every part of that experience, as simple as it is. But that's the thing with chefs. We can go an entire day, going through the most beautiful food at an event. And then late night, we're found getting street tacos or eating something as simple as Cinnamon Toast Crunch, because it's effortless, because it took no time, because it's so simple. And it's I think it's a teacher that's teaching, at a college all day long, and then all they want to do is just come home and watch Jersey Shore, because it's just dumb. They don't want to you don't want to use your brain. I think that's a good analogy for kind of where I'm trying to come from.
I've been married, God, since 79, and I'd have to say I've probably cooked 99% or more of the meals. Now, having said that, I like experimenting a little bit. I like learning. I like, looking at a recipe and adapting and making it kind of mine. But does this ever happen to you? So, I will make something maybe that takes 3 or 4 hours, and when it's time to serve it, I don't want it, or at least not now. Do you know what I mean? I've just been around it so much. Doesn't interest me at the moment.
It's some weird thing that happens, but I guess first off, it happens to me all the time. And it's kind I really have tried to push myself because I'm creating these great meals and I'm sitting down with my family at night and we're all in our different directions between dance and soccer and whatnot. And when it comes down to it, it's like, that's like our time. Like we sit at the table, we talk about what we're grateful for, what we're, something good we did, because there's a whole ritual to it. I think when you can really appreciate dinner with your family, but I'll always graze a little bit, but sometimes I'll want to eat something completely different. It's just different with kids because it's like I got to inspire them for them to eat their food, and it's like it's the food I made for them. But listen, you can't get away from the critics. I've got a 6-year-old, a 9-year-old, and 10-year-old. I'm surprised. I think when my 10-year-old gets the opportunity, she's probably going to write me a Yelp review. I can guarantee it with that one. My younger one, great, helps me out in the kitchen, gives suggestions, got a great palate. The middle one, just along for the ride. But the older one, she's definitely going to give somebody a review one day. She's got a strong opinion about what she likes or doesn't like. But
I cannot thank you enough. You've been a joy, a pleasure, and an honor, all rolled up into one to spend time with. I'm forever grateful that you've spent an hour with us